Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's program, Becoming an Effective Advocate. I'm so delighted that you have joined us today, and I'm going to stop my share, but I just want you to see our lovely partners and their names that have partnered with us for today's program. So good evening. I am Dr. Sabrina Dent, and I am the president for the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation. And I bring you greetings as a guest on Native Acostan lands outside of the nation's capitals. For those who are not familiar with the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation, we are an independent nonprofit education organization and theological think tank housed on the beautiful campus of Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond, Virginia. We're also a community of scholars, faith leaders, organizers, and citizens dedicated to being and building the beloved community in Virginia and beyond. We're committed to embarking on a bold journey of living our faith and advancing justice and building sustainable paths for authentic reconciliation and community. The center offers a variety of educational programs, and tonight's program is one of those. We offer programs for students, congregations, communities, and faith leaders, as well as public officials that advance justice and build cultures for reconciliation. In our work, we recognize that partnership is critical, is necessary in order for us to do what we have to do in society. Civic engagement is not only a right, but it is a responsibility that each person has to ensure that every single human being is treated with dignity and respect, while ensuring that our laws reflect equality and equity for all people. So as citizens, we know that it's our constitutional right to petition our elected officials and representatives to support and introduce and oppose legislation, but this is something that we don't take lightly. And again, we know that we can't do it by ourselves. So we recognize that this work takes all of us. And this is why collaboration is necessary for us to build what we call the beloved community and take action in the communities on issues that impact our lives. And I'm talking about voter protection, healthcare, reproductive freedom, racial justice, religious freedom, you name it. If it's a justice issue, it is important to us in holding the beloved community in care. And so with that, I want to say thank you to our friends at Union Presbyterian Seminary's Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation, the National Council of Churches, USA, and Sojourners for partnering with us on tonight's program. Each one of these organizations are doing the necessary work to advance justice issues via grassroots efforts and at public policy levels. And so with that, I would like to invite my friend and my faithful democracy colleague, Lauren Reliford, who is the political director at Sojourners, to give us a few remarks. And I just want to say, welcome, Lauren. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I am super excited to be here with literally two of my favorite people in the universe, Ms. Miller and Dr. Dent. I unfortunately have to hop off because I'm doing another meeting. So I'm one of those people that's got to be in two places at once. But I am just really excited to see the faces on here, the fact that there's bodies in the room. You guys are going to learn a lot. I say Ms. Miller because I'm Southern, so it's just a show of respect. But I want to also just underscore why this kind of training is really important. And that's kind of what I wanted to spend my remarks on. And I think that Dr. Den and Ms. Miller will agree is that we work, or at least, we work to influence federal government, right? So our advocacy is always at the top. It's kind of all politics is local. So really, by the time it gets to the federal level, the problem has already been defined, and there's a narrative already attached to it. And so it gets really hard for us sometimes to decouple some of these narratives, right? So you think about drug sentencing is something I'm working on. And this narrative that, for example, crack is more dangerous than cocaine. And we realize that there's a lot that's actually rooted in there. Like, why is crack considered more dangerous than cocaine? It's probably because of the people that are using it, or the people that tend to be arrested more, who also tend to be over policed, who also tend to look like me and my brother and my dad and my mom, right? And so that is where it becomes really important for our message to be connected to those folks on the ground, those mobilizers who are in the communities, who have that real lived experience. So that way, when crazy things come our way, when a member of Congress says, oh, well, voting is a states' rights issue, I have that knowledge and that lived experience to say, well, actually, states' rights is the same thing that was used to enslave my people. Do you really want to maybe reconsider that argument again? But it's not just enough for folks like me, whose job it is to be paid to do this. It really matters that everyone in this country is trained on how to speak to, how to engage with, and reach out to your members of Congress, not just because we say it's a thing, but like that's literally the best thing that you can do as a citizen. And I think for a lot of us, it's a privilege. It's actually a right. We're not gonna say it's a right that we always haven't had access to. And so my hope is that in this training, you guys feel like the narrative and the work that you're doing now has a clear path to make it to these halls of Congress, while also reminding yourself that it's very easy to say, I want change, I want change, I want change. This needs to change. This is a problem. It's a completely separate thing when you engage with that very system that you've been trying to change, this very system that is relatively new, at least when you look at it from this standpoint, because a lot of these rights that we have came to fruition in 1960s, 1950s. So democracy as we know it is relatively new, but the system has been around for 200 and some years. And the people that are currently in the system, cannot underscore this enough, are so committed to the power and the status and the benefits that white supremacy, the idolatry to white supremacy, has afforded them. And they are beyond committed to keeping that status quo. And the problem is that those folks have the power of the pen. You can see it with the way that things are going. And so it really doesn't matter if you have a slim Democratic Senate majority, right? Whiteness, the idolatry to whiteness, and white supremacy is still the motivator. And so you becoming an effective advocate creates a bigger echo chamber for that tiny majority who's excising a lot of power to realize, wait, this is a big issue. And just always remind yourself too, that the things that you're going to learn, it's not going to be easy. It took 30 years for folks to get a bare bones gun reform bill passed, right? That we know is not anything that we need, but think about it. If it took 30 years to get the bare minimum done, the things that we're trying to do and the things that we're committed to changing are going to take a lot of work. Civil rights, human rights is something that unfortunately we will always have to fight for, as long as there are systems in place and folks who are committed to stepping on others. And so I just hope that after this training, you guys feel like you actually have power and that you feel much more equipped to fight back and feel empowered to know that your voice does matter, and that you will continue to ring that bell. You will continue to make sure folks don't get sleep, because if you don't sleep, they don't get to sleep. If you're not free, they don't get to be free. And so I'm going to hop off. I hope the best for all of you all. I will continue to keep you all in my prayers, and I'm going to let the indomitable Miss Andrea Miller take it away. Take care, everyone.
Hey, Lo, thank you so very much. And Dr. Dent, Sabrina, thank you so very much for inviting me. What we're going to be talking about tonight is how to be an effective advocate. I mean, we've all seen the ineffective ones. We want to be effective. What does effective mean? Well, it means that when you are in the halls of Congress, people either A, want to see you, or B, if you're like me, they run from you. And just the threat of showing up in their office is enough to frequently get them to do what they need to do. So what I'm going to do is I have a whole course here. I'm going to share my screen, and when I'm done, I will put the link to this presentation in the chat so that anyone who wants to have it will be able to go through it with maybe friends who weren't able to make it tonight. So, how to be an effective citizen advocate. I was on Capitol Hill from 2010 to 2019. I got hundreds of people literally on bills. I got legislation introduced. I've gotten legislation passed. So what are we going to be talking about tonight? There'll be an introduction. Now, we are using the word advocate. We can also change that to lobbying. So lobbying, there is an art to it. So as faith organizations, as nonprofit organizations, of 501c3, we are advocates. Technically, what we're doing is we are contacting elected officials who have the power to pass laws to do what we want. That's called lobbying. Now, we're going to be talking about the science of lobbying, online legislative tools, advocacy tools, and I haven't given it in a while, but there is a next level course that really, really focuses on digital tools. We're going to start with the fun stuff tonight. So anyway, that's me. I'm a policy director. I mentioned I was on Capitol Hill from 2010 to 2019. I am the working group chair of the Democracy and Governance group in the Virginia Green New Deal. I was the 2008 Democratic nominee from the old Virginia 4th Congressional District. So if any of you are in Virginia now, back in the days when I ran, Petersburg, well, Richmond was not in the 4th Congressional District. All right, lobbying / advocating. There are over 30,000 paid lobbyists in DC. So we are going to be talking about citizen lobbying or citizen advocacy. In other words, nobody's giving you any money to do it. Now, legislators need educating. They don't know everything. There's a few of them that don't seem to know anything, but I digress. Now, lobbying and advocacy, it works. If it didn't work, we wouldn't have organizations paying 30,000 people to go to DC and advocate on their behalf. It is our responsibility to let our elected officials understand our agenda. My mother had a lot of sayings, and I am just really, really, really amazed at the number of them that literally have stuck with me all my life. And one of those sayings were, if you don't ask, and the people who have the power to do what you want don't do it, shame on you. If you do ask, and then they don't do it, shame on them. You want to make sure that every major need, justice need in your life is a shame on them for not granting your demand, as opposed to shame on you for not being willing to ask for something righteous. Now, when we are lobbying or advocating, what we are doing is we are seeking to influence, we are working to persuade, we are pressuring, and it needs to be consistent and persistent. Now, one of the questions I normally ask when I'm giving this course in person is, who are the most successful lobbyists that you know? And people start racking their brains trying to figure out, oh, do I know the names of any big lobbying groups? No, everybody in this room, you know the most successful and effective lobbyists on the planet: children. Now, think back. Is there anybody here who ever told a child, no, you weren't going to give them something or allow them to do something, and yet somehow, ultimately, you gave in? That was because children are the most impactful and successful advocates in the world, because they are consistent with their ask, and they are persistent until they get what you want, or you make their life so unhappy that they finally give up for a moment while they work to recruit or regroup. All right, now, whoops. Okay, I don't really believe Mark Warner is calling me. Oh, he might be. No, I know he wouldn't, because when he sees me, he runs. That shows me that I'm effective. He's like, oh, heavens, it's her. Now, who can advocate or lobby? It's your right as a citizen to contact those in elected office who represent you. Now, when I was on the Hill, I had an organization, People Demanding Action. Organizations that are 501c4 are unlimited in the amount that they can lobby on issues. In other words, we're technically unlimited in the amount of money we can spend and the amount of time. If your organization is a 501c3 like mine, I basically now do very little lobbying. I basically do a lot of teaching, and we do a ton of tattling. Tattling, lobbying, not the same thing. So in Georgia, when the senators and the representatives were trying to overturn vote by mail, we knew the scope of outreach that we needed to do would cost far too much money for us to do it ourselves. So what did we do? We called 321,000 voters in Georgia. Actually, no, we only called 50,000 voters in Georgia who told us they were going to vote by mail. And we tattled on their legislators. We said, did you know that your state senator is a sponsor of a bill and they are trying to get rid of vote by mail? What? Would you like to give your legislator a piece of your mind? Well, I certainly would. If you hang on, we will patch you through. Again, we weren't lobbying, we were tattling. Totally different emotion. 501c3 organizations are limited to 15% of their annual budget. So that means if you go to Capitol Hill and basically maybe your organization is paying for your travel, That's probably for most organizations not going to be 15% of their annual budget. So you are just fine. Now, why should faith organizations go to the Hill? Because when legislators see you and they become aware that you are part of a church or other faith organization, they are automatically thinking, how many people are in that church? Because you obviously are not representing one, you are representing many. And the only question in their mind is how many, and can they all vote for me or vote against me? So that is what is going on in their mind. Now, what is going on in your mind is, how would you feel if one of your best paid employees was not doing what they were supposed to do? So remember, they are not paying us, we are paying them. Now, why do we even bother? Why do we do this work? Well, number one, it's our responsibility as citizens. Number two, corporations really get how impactful this is. So, like I said, they've got an army of 30,000 people on the Hill and in state houses representing them. So we need our voices to be heard in the halls of Congress and state capitals. So ultimately, what do we want to do? We want to turn no into maybe, maybe into yes, and yes into can I help build support? So in other words, no matter what they say, we have got an ask and we have got a goal. It isn't enough for an elected official to say, yes, I really agree with your position. That is really, really good. And I'm glad you came to see me. Great. I am so glad that you appreciate that. Now, which of your colleagues will you be willing to share the information that I shared with you? And normally they're like, what? I'm supposed to do, yeah, you're supposed to do something. So we never let them off the hook. Now, lobbying is an art and it's a science. Today, we're going to be looking at the art primarily. It's an ongoing campaign. You have a series of planned actions that are coordinated to have the desired effect. So it's carefully planned, carefully researched, carefully executed. As I said, it is an art and it is a science. Now, I'm going to do this next section kind of in a more interactive fashion. I'm going to start going through some of the steps and the thought processes. And then I'm going to give you opportunities to directly weigh in with comments and or questions, okay? So if you're preparing to take a nap, now you've got to wake up because now we're in the interactive part. Everything about advocacy starts with a message. And the first part of the message is to build coalitions so that you are not the only person, you are not the only organization supporting whatever this issue is. So what I'm going to do is we're going to ignore the issue that I have here. I'll teach from it a little, but I'm going to say, you are getting ready to go on the Hill. We're going to say it is the 118th Congress, and we did just fine, mind you. And you are going to be talking to legislators about the Freedom to Vote Act and why that is important. So again, different people may remember different points of the legislation, or it may be bills that got passed in your home state. We are going to give you, or I'm going to give you an opportunity. What might you say to other organizations or other faith groups that maybe hadn't quite gotten on board yet? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see if you raise your hand. What would you say to other faith groups, community or civic groups that hadn't really gotten involved with the Freedom to Vote Act in the 117th Congress, and you're working to get your coalition builder? I'll take maybe 2 people with ideas. Oh, come on, we got 22 people here. Well, all right, we got 21. Somebody probably has an idea, and it would be great because you may very well come up with something that everybody else in 117th missed. What would you say is a messaging point? Why is this important? Why do you want other people to join you? They're going, we don't know.
I guess I'll jump in there since no,
They're also quiet. They're also good.
Exactly. So one of the things that I'm thinking of is pointing out how the issues impact many different communities. I think when people fail to think about the intersectionality of issues and why voting rights is important, because when you just say voting rights, for some people, that's just a blanket thing, right? But if you say voting rights for the advancement of women's rights, or for reproductive justice, or if you say for returning citizens to be able to exercise their right, like if you're very specific about the issue, and since we do interfaith work and we do religious freedom work, right? And thinking about how that impacts religious minority communities where there is a lot of, we have to say, Christian nationalism and religious privilege happening in this country, it's important to help people to see the issues a little differently. So for me, I would go to this group and say, hey, I know it might seem like this doesn't have impact on your community. However, let me point out some of the many different issues that come up that directly concern your community, whether it's religious or non-religious. I think it's important for people to understand that. It comes down to the human dignity issues too.
Yes, yes, yes. I can't remember who said it, but it's going around in my head. The ability to vote is our ability to change things. And I don't think there's anybody on this call who would go, oh, everything is absolutely perfect just as it is. And there is not a single thing that I think needs to be changed. So, oh, brother Ryan Roberts, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah. What's especially important for me, I mean, there are lots of really great aspects of the bill, but I think it's especially valuable that it would promote same-day voter registration, because it allows any community that wants to have a say to work right up to election day. You know, if you're getting people and it's taken some time to get certain members energized, they can still be effective on election day. So even procrastinators like me can get something done and not have to wait until the next round. If you show up at 7:58 on election day, that person's voice will be counted.
I love that. And invariably, if you've ever worked at the polls, you know there are people who show up to vote and they're in the wrong precinct. They moved and they forgot to change their voter registration and they're at their new precinct. Now, in Virginia, generally they will let you vote a provisional ballot, but because you're not registered at the precinct, they're not going to count your vote. With same-day registration, you can fix little problems like that. And also periodically, remember, most states clean their voter rolls, and occasionally people who haven't moved through a mistake get unregistered. Well, unregistered voters can't vote. And if you've ever seen the look on someone's face when they show up to vote and they turn out not to be registered, that is so very important. ER Ship, your hand is raised.
Hi. One thing I think you'd have to do is to overcome a commonly heard sentiment: my vote really doesn't count. Nothing really will change. So I think what you'd have to do is to add to your arguments examples of success. And it depends on who your audience is, but you could point to things like the Roe versus Wade decision was something that was long time coming because people consistently voted for people who were going to promote their agenda, including naming certain people to the Supreme Court. So you have to show them that the first time around, you may not see a direct connection between your vote and a particular action, but you have to be in it for the long haul.
Yes. And now for those of us in Virginia, where in 2017, we lost tying for control of the Virginia House by one vote, we know how important every vote is. And one of the things that we are changing in our messaging this year is we are tackling that head on, where we actually say in all our messages, instead of your voice matters, we're saying every vote counts. And sometimes I say to voters, if your vote didn't matter, why are all these people spending all this time and money to stop you from doing it? All righty. Let's get back to work. Great exercise, people. Love it. I knew you'd think of something. I've got a little messaging example here. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly. When we are developing messaging, think of it as messaging is sales. Are there images that you want to make sure that you use so that people see themselves in it? I learned this a long time ago. I used to be in sales. The number one rule of sales is people do things for their reasons, not yours. So in your conversations, and I do this all the time with legislators and legislative staff, I will ask them questions. They're frequently expecting me to just be in there and I'm pitching and pitching and pitching. And sometimes I am. But when I'm talking to people on the other side, or I don't really know where they stand, I have a lot of questions. I want to find out what's important to them. And can I bring my messaging on my issue to match with what they've told me is important to them? So clean air, clean water, and land for all Virginians. Who doesn't like clean air and clean water? I want you to look at the image in the other one. We've got an older white male. Now his arms are crossed, but he appears to be listening intently to the message. Investments in local scale agriculture in communities across Virginia. And then a lot of other messaging images. Green New Deal, good jobs, good deal, good life. Your messaging should be short. It should be sweet. It should be punchy. If people can't say it, they won't remember it. That's why in early childhood education, so much of what we teach young children rhymes. We want to have that musicality of rhyming so that it sticks in their brain. So as you are developing your messaging, and again, a faith message, is there a faith quote that we can add where people go, oh, I never thought of it that way? One of the quotes that I frequently use is, and again, this will be in my questioning. Do you remember in the Bible when Jesus had render to Caesar the things that render to God the things that are God, and to Caesar's the things that are Caesar's? Well, all right, I go to church every Sunday, but Caesar requires voting, and you're making it real hard for me to render to Caesar. And people stop and they go, what? So it A, got their attention, B, put it in a faith context and made them go, ooh. And that's what you want. You want their attention. All right, I'm going to get out of that. That's a lot of Green New Deal stuff. Now, one of the things where I became the master is what I call the 30-second pitch. Most of you have figured out right now, my voice is strong. When I want to get loud, I can make it loud, and my voice carries. So when I would go to the Hill with my team on a very slow day, we would go to 70 offices. On a good day, now this is in the House, we would go to 140 offices. When you visit a legislator, you're not going to win any awards for, and we talked to that legislator for an hour. Well, I talked to the legislator across the hall for 30 seconds and got him to agree to sign on to the bill. So one of the things I would do is when I would see a legislator going in their office, if they were not currently a co-sponsor on the bill, I would go into their office and I would stand at the desk and I would speak very, very loudly. Well, I only need to see whoever it is for 30 seconds. I can make my point in 30 seconds. Surely they have 30 seconds. And invariably, the door would open and the legislator would come out. Often they would be with an aide, and they would be, what are you going to talk me into in 30 seconds? And I'd look at my watch and say, has the 30 seconds started? Now, when you're talking to a legislator and you're making a pitch, legislators can introduce legislation, they can co-sponsor legislation, they can vote on legislation. What's really, really, really important to them in Congress, they write upwards of 8,000 bills a year. And some of those bills are very, very similar. You need on the top of your head to have that bill number and the key points so that you can make that pitch to that legislator in 30 minutes, 30 seconds. So they know this is what you want. Now, this is when you're talking directly to a legislator. Their staff cannot commit them. They might say, I believe the legislator has supported legislation like this in the past, or this is the kind of legislation she likes to support, or we've never sponsored anything like this, but the legislator cannot commit their member. However, when you're talking directly to the member can go, I want to be on that bill. And invariably, I would finish my 30-second pitch, and the legislator would look at their aide and they would say, am I on that bill? And I would say, if you were on that bill, I wouldn't be here. Their next question would be, why am I not on that bill? And invariably, the legislative director or the aide or whoever it was would be, because nobody ever explained it like that before, get me on that bill. And then off to the next office. All right. So in your 30 seconds, your name, the bill number, what it does, and why they should support it. Remember, people do things for their reasons. What do they get? Now, the science, there are 6 stages in the life of legislation. Number 1, if it is a brand new piece of legislation, you need a bill champion. You need the bill sponsor. In Virginia, we call them patrons. Same thing. Then you're going to go get additional co-sponsors so that they don't bring out a bill where it's the person who introduced it and there are absolutely no co-sponsors. Then after they introduce the bill, now that the bill has got a number, now you want to add co-sponsors. One of the big things I would always do when I was on the Hill is I would get the member to write a letter to their colleagues. It's sometimes called a dear colleague letter, which basically says, I've introduced this piece of legislation. It does da 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 da, and please support it. And we would literally walk that dear colleague letter to the offices on the Hill. Our very, very, very best day was, and this was, we were working to get, what were we doing? To get Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. We had the dear colleague letter. The bill had not been introduced. It was going to be introduced or dropped 2 days later. We got 65 initial co-sponsors in one day, walking that letter around. Now, your next big opportunity for ramping up support is when there is going to be a committee hearing. And normally when there's a committee hearing, there is probably going to be a vote. And if you are successful in getting your bill voted out of committee, at some point that bill could be heading to the floor for a floor vote. And then once you get one chamber, Senate, House, Senate, to pass your bill, now that bill is probably going to cross over to the other chamber, where you get to go through the 6 stages of a bill all over again. Now, if you're lucky, then the bill also has a Senate co-sponsor, or there is a co-sponsor waiting in the wings. So finding the bill sponsor, you got your coalition together, you've talked to other groups. Yes, they are willing to work with you on finding a bill sponsor. You've organized your talking points, all your supporters have contributed to the talking points. And now you're going, all right, who should we ask to sponsor this bill? Number one, is there anybody in Congress or the State House who has sponsored a similar bill? Maybe it was a previous session, maybe it was a couple of sessions ago. How many organizations do you have in support of this bill? If you've only got 3 or 4, but they're big national organizations, go ahead, try to get the bill. If there's 3 or 4 and they're really, really tiny organizations, work on getting more organizations supporting you as well. Are there faith groups that support the bill? You're already faith groups. So you're already one of the big important steps. If faith groups support the bill, if God is supporting the bill, then okay, this is really important. And that means there are hundreds, if not thousands of people that are behind you on this. And what groups are willing to help you build co-sponsors? Some groups only like to do the messaging. They really don't want to work on getting co-sponsors. That's not what they do. And other groups are like, well, if you like, tell us what you want us to do, we're willing to help. Now, you've got a list of possible people. Sometimes you may only have 3 or 4 names on that list. That's okay. Now, here are the traits that define a bill champion, because remember, your goal is to get this bill passed. And that means in the House, you're going to need 218 votes, or really, 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 really close to it. In the Senate, unless it's a budget bill, you're going to need 60 votes. All right. So here are the traits that define a bill champion. Are they willing to help you promote the bill? Will they address the coalition and inspire them and fire them up? Will they promote the bill to their colleagues? One of the last pieces of legislation I worked on was removing the ratification deadline from the Equal Rights Amendment. And I had the opportunity to choose the co-sponsor for the bill when the original co-sponsor left Congress. And when I looked at the people, and they were all very, very impressive, I chose Congresswoman Jackie Spear. And I chose Jackie Spear because Jackie worked her bills. When there was a line in the House for members to go up and deliver floor speeches, Jackie Spear was talking to members about her legislation and building support. Remember, Congress is one of the most exclusive country clubs in the world. And those of us as private citizens, there are many places we cannot go because we are not members. But the members always have access to each other. So if you've got a member that is going to work that bill, that is the member that you fight for to be your champion. Next question, do they work with legislators on the other side, or are they constantly bringing out bills where there's only members of their party on the bill? Redistricting gave me a new legislator. Abigail Spanberger is now my member of Congress. It used to be Rob Whitman. For a very, very only in her second term, running for her third term congressperson, Abigail Spanberger has passed a lot of legislation with bipartisan support. So if you got a bill and you're really going to need somebody who can talk to people on the other side of the house, that can be a real consideration. Are they on a committee that can send the bill to the floor? So is your legislator on a committee of jurisdictions, preferably the first committee of jurisdiction? Because if your bill doesn't get past that first committee, it may be dead in the water for that entire legislative session, or someone's going to have to introduce another version of the bill. Stage one, are there any questions? See, I did this for 9 years.
Andrea, I see a question in the chat, but it had to do with the previous slide about a pitch. Linda McKinnish Bridges asked, can you give us a sample of that 30-second pitch? Like, she would like to hear how you pitch the representative in 30 seconds, if you could do that.
Thank you.
Well, again, normally when you're going to do a 30-second pitch, you've prepared it, work it all out in your mind, and you're ready to go. I will kind of ad lib one. The legislators come out to see me. Oh, I'll do an old one. I will do the remove the ratification deadline on the Equal Rights Amendment. I did a whole bunch of those in 30 seconds. Hi, so-and-so legislator, has the 30 seconds begun? All right, yeah, what are you going to talk me into? Well, my name is Andrea Miller. I'm with People Demanding Action, and I am here to talk to you today about HJ Red 78, which will remove the ratification deadline on the Equal Rights Amendment. Yes, the Equal Rights Amendment is still a thing. This will add women to the Constitution, and this will enshrine the notion of equal pay for equal work in the Constitution. Right now, the Constitution only gives women the right to vote. We want to make sure that women have the right to equal pay. Will you become a co-sponsor of this legislation? That was about 30 seconds.
Thank you, Ms. Andrea. And I think that is so important that you pointed out at the end, you made the ask, because
Yes.
the whole point of being there is to make the ask.
Right.
Thank
Thank you.
That are you in or are you out?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Thank you for that sample.
All right. And now when the lead sponsor submits the bill, legislative services will put a number on the bill. The bill will now be known by the bill number, and frequently the bill will have a name, HR 1 for the People Act. This was a Virginia bill, HB 1968, Sunday absentee voting. In Congress, the lead sponsor also writes a dear colleague letter. And then what kind of outreach to supporters are you planning to do now that you have a lead sponsor? Normally, this may be an invitation to an event where you walk the supporters through the legislation. You've now got a bill, you've now got a bill number, and this is what the bill does. Ding, 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 ding. And then it's going to do ding, 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 ding. And then it's going to say it is illegal to do ding, 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 ding. And people are like, wow, that is a great bill. That's almost everything that we wanted. And then if there are people who say, well, it doesn't seem to do the ding, the ding, the ding. Well, when we talked to the bill sponsors, they felt that if we added that, that would keep us from being able to get more co-sponsors. So the plan is we will introduce this bill. When we successfully pass this bill, we will come back with a smaller standalone bill that will accomplish the other things, when now we will be able to focus solely on these things. So that is how we have sometimes handled but it doesn't have this thing that we wanted. Now, when you are figuring out who are my targets, after you've got your bill sponsor, everybody else that was being considered to be the lead sponsor, they're going to get asked to be an initial co-sponsor. And then you are going to hit congress.gov, popbox.gov, Bill Track 50, track bill, whatever it is that you use, and you're going to go back and see, are there other bills that are currently introduced that are similar to this? Who are co-sponsors of that bill? We're going to want to get them on this bill too. Were there bills introduced in previous sessions that are similar to this bill? We want to go and get all those co-sponsors on the bill. And that becomes your whip list of these are your primary targets. These are the people that we think are most likely to co-sponsor this bill. And then if you're me, because you enjoy a good fight, you start looking at Republicans, people on the other side. Who do you want to approach on this bill? I was always able to get Republicans on my peace legislation faster than I was able to get some Democrats, because I understood what the talking points were for people who identified as conservatives. So if you have a Republican friend, my son is a Republican, talk to them about what would make this bill of interest to people who identify as conservatives. And I always had two letters. I had one letter to people who were progressive, and I had another letter to people who were conservative, using their language. Remember, people do things for their reasons, not yours. When the bill is introduced, all the co-sponsors are listed at the federal level. The more co-sponsors for the introduction of a bill, the better you are. And then also, always look at what committees is this bill going to have to go through. Federal legislation sometimes needs to go through 2 or 3 committees before it actually makes its way to the floor. So make sure you have enough support, preferably co-sponsors, on the committees of jurisdictions. Now, co-sponsor milestones. In the House, you have reached a milestone when you have 100 co-sponsors. That is a big deal. You are almost halfway there. 109 co-sponsors is halfway to the 218 that you need. Less than 20% of bills introduced in the US House of Representatives reach 100 co-sponsors. And again, remember, they're introducing more than 8,600 bills in a legislative session. Now, on the Senate side, 20 co-sponsors at the introduction of a bill is considered very, very strong. I was again privileged to help bring on the Senate co-sponsor for removing the ratification deadline on the Equal Rights Amendment. For years, when Representative Rob Andrews of New Jersey brought the bill out, it was an orphan bill, meaning it did not have a sponsor in the other chamber. I've known Bernie Sanders for years. So I went to see Bernie and I asked Bernie if he would be good enough to co-sponsor or be the Senate sponsor for the Equal Rights Amendment. And he said, look, he said, I agree, this is really, really important. And now again, this is going back to 2013, before Bernie was Bernie, to everybody. He has always been Bernie to me, but before he was Bernie to everybody. He said, if you want to be able to get other people on that bill, he said, go see Senator Ben Cardin. He wants to be known as the justice senator, and this is a justice issue. So we trotted right down the hall to see Senator Ben Cardin, and they said yes. I can't remember what the year was. It was probably 2017. I get a call from Senator Cardin's office saying they're going to reintroduce the bill, and they want to have 20 co-sponsors when they drop the bill. And I said, when are you planning on dropping the bill? Today at 5. Bill, it's noon. Yes, that's why I'm calling you. So they had 10 co-sponsors on the bill. We needed to get 10 more co-sponsors, senators, mind you, by 5 p.m. The bill was introduced with 20 co-sponsors. We looked up everybody that had been on the previous iteration of the bill. I called 2 of them and threatened to come in their office if they didn't get on the bill. I liked that, didn't even need to talk to them, just said, I'm going to give you a message. Tell the senator I need him to get on this bill. If he is not on this bill, I will be in his office tomorrow and remind him he doesn't want that. All right. And then the other thing that means a bill is probably moving is if the bill is bipartisan and the remove the ratification deadline on the Equal Rights Amendment was a mini bipartisan bill. We never in the House got more than 2 Republicans on it. And generally it was the Republican men from New Jersey, which was Alice Paul's state, but it doesn't matter how we got them or why they were there. In the count, we were introducing a bipartisan bill. And now, when you're dealing with state legislation, if the legislation is bipartisan, and again, even if you've only got 5 or 6 co-sponsors, that is a major milestone. Keep working to add co-sponsors, and you're going to keep adding co-sponsors until there's going to be a vote. Now, when there's going to be a committee hearing, and normally the office is going to call you up and say, they're planning a committee hearing next Friday. And that's like, okay, we got to try to get more co-sponsors. Will people be able to come in and testify for the bill? Normally that's a yes. So you want to line up your people who can make cogent arguments for your bill. Occasionally we oppose things. Sometimes you need cogent arguments in opposition, whatever it is that you're doing. Now, this is where life gets really, really interesting. You need to know your opposition. You need to know what their talking points are so that the speakers you bring in will counter whatever their talking points are. All right. And you also need to know who are those organizations that are in opposition. We were working with a group in New York where they failed to give us the one organization that was in opposition to what they were doing. And that one organization, one person in it, was able to kill their bill. So you need to know who the opposition is. So this is the one time when a bill is going to have a committee vote that it is okay for you to call and or email committee members, even though they are not your legislators, because a vote is coming up. And again, know who is for you, who is against you, and who possibly with the proper arguments can be turned hopefully to your side. And this is just a sample of one of the tools we were using to lobby a committee. This was Virginia 2021, and we were working to pass a constitutional amendment making restoration of rights automatic. So we developed a letter, and then we also developed a phone script. And then in our tool, when people opened the email, they were able to email with one click every member of that committee. And then they were able, if they opened this on their phone, to push the little phone button and literally call that member. And then we had the script. And then the floor vote. This is when we get into thank and spank. You're going to want a tool like Action Network. I'm suggesting that because it's free, where you're going to have two letters. You're going to send a thank you letter to every member who is a co-sponsor of that bill. You cannot say thank you to legislators enough. You are going to send a why you should be on the bill, known as the thank you letter, to people who are not on the bill. And that may be enough for you to pass that bill. There's one more thing you want to think about. If you're going to make it to a floor vote, is leadership for you or against you? And that would be leadership of probably your party. The other side, their leadership is probably against it. But if their leadership is for you, you've got a really, really, really great chance. And then are the whips for you or against you? Every party and caucus has a whip. What is the job of the whip? The leader says, we want this bill to pass. It is the job of the whip to go and get members that might be a little iffy to be in support of this bill. The leaders want this bill to pass. Oh, okay, this bill is important to leadership. If your bill is not important to leadership, probably the whips are not going to engage. If your leadership is against the bill, then they may engage the whips against you. So you want to know, where are the whips? And then finally, you've successfully passed the bill in Chamber A. And now, what's your strategy for when that bill is over to the other chamber? Now, in federal legislation, we know that unless it's budget or a Supreme Court nominee, we need 60 votes because of the filibuster. So we've got to figure out who are the people so we can run that sponsorship level up to 20, and which senators can we get to talk to other senators about coming over to our way of thinking. And then when it starts to look like there's going to be movement in the Senate, and we are potentially going to get this bill through both chambers. All right, where is the executive on this? In Congress, it's the president. In states, it's the governor, because both the president and the governor have veto power. They can say, well, Congress, you may think this is a really good idea, but I don't, so I'm going to veto this. All right. So you always want to know, where is the executive on this? Now, you normally need more than a simple majority to override a veto. They're normally going to need a supermajority. But I always tell people, when you are advocating, you are in the business of knowing, where do people stand. You want to get as many people as possible in the yes column or the no column. You don't want a bunch of people in the maybe column, because maybe can rapidly get turned against you. You want people in that yes column. All right, now this part's going to go pretty quickly. When you're in the office and when you are meeting with staff, don't bring 30 people to an office visit. Show numbers in the field, not in the office. So your lobby team or your advocacy team should be between 3 and 5 people. If you are training new people, maybe let it go up to 7 or 8, but a crowd in the office is distracting and doesn't really serve a purpose. You want to have one person who is an expert on the bill, so that if staff ask you a question, there is a person who really knows. Now, don't make stuff up. If you don't know, admit you don't know and offer to do some research. But hopefully there is someone there where any question staff can ask you about that bill, you can give them a straight answer. And you normally want to have at least one constituent. Now, when we were lobbying, we would frequently have non-constituents, because I would put 10 people on the Hill, and they were representing a national organization that had 495,000 members. So we definitely had a constituent in your district, whoever you were. Now, never go on an advocacy visit without a handout. It's like canvassing for an election and not leaving anything. It's like you weren't there. Now, I like a 1-page letter that begins, as voters in your district. So, hello, Mr. Elected Person. We elected you. We can elect somebody else. As voters in your district, we support or oppose give the bill number, there's the name of the bill, put that in there. And then you're going to give them 3 to 5 bullet pointed reasons why. This is what they should think of. And then when you close, you're going to close with, this is what it's going to do for them. And then you're going to have your ask, please vote yes on the da, 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 no, or whatever it is. Show how your recommendations can bring in votes. People who are elected are interested in getting elected again. If they have been on past legislation, this is similar to other bills they have sponsored. So you don't need to be scared of this. You've been on other bills like this before. And then, since the staff cannot decide for their member, make sure the staff has the strongest talking points possible when they sit down with the member to go over who they saw. So all that's important. Now, online legislative tools. Congress.gov is the official one. There's PopBox, GovTrack, and TrackBill. PopBox and GovTrack are free, just like Congress.gov. They're just privately labeled products. TrackBill is free to look up legislation, but if you want to put a tracker on it, then you're going to need to pay. And then for states, whatever the state legislative service is, and then TrackBill does all 50 states as well as US Congress. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and see if people had any other questions. Oh, thank you for all of these lovely, lovely notes that you've dropped in. I'm going to give you another link, and this is a link that you may want to share with other people. After redistricting, a lot of people don't know their current legislative districts. I spelled legislative wrong. Can't believe I did that. And I'm going to drop in the link. Anybody can use that, and it will give you your federal and your state districts. It will give you your old one before redistricting and your new one after redistricting.
Thank you for dropping that in the chat. Ms. Andrea, that is so important for people to know. Like, any change that happens that impacts how they're able to vote or who their representative may be is so, so critical. And it happens a lot without people knowing. So thank you for dropping that in the chat. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Miller about anything that was shared in tonight's presentation? I know it's a lot of information. This video will be made available for anyone, well, to everyone that registered to attend. So you'll be able to watch this again.
And I am dropping the link to the presentation in the chat again as well.
Thank you so much, Ms. Andrea. So I see there's some comments that are coming in to saying this was informative and thank you. And I want to thank you on behalf of the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation, as well as our partners at the National Council of Churches, Sojourners, and Union Presbyterian Seminary's Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation for taking the time to really walk us through the steps of what it means to become an effective advocate. And these issues, they impact all of us, every aspect of our life. And so, like you said, we pay our representatives. They work for us. And so we have every right to talk to them. We have every right to advocate for them and petition what our concerns are. And so I'm going to drop into the chat a link for you all to provide feedback regarding this training. At the same time, although you did not mention it, Ms. Andrea, I would like for you to share about the training that you're offering for the Virginia voter training that's happening on the 26th. If you can mention something about that, because I think it's important to provide every resource that people need if they're interested in taking action even more.
All right, if you live in Virginia and you want to be certified to register voters in Virginia on Tuesday at 6 o'clock, I'll be doing a Virginia voter registration training, and I'm going to drop in the link on Tuesday at 6 p.m. And here's the link. And what I do is I stress how to register homeless individuals, how to check to find out are people registered, what their current address is, and also how to work with returning citizens, how to determine if they can register and vote. We do so many restoration and registration events, and it always breaks my heart that 90 to 95% of the people who come to these events, their rights have been restored years ago. They just didn't know.
Thank you so much, Ms. Miller. I appreciate that. And so if you're in Virginia, please consider signing up if you're interested, sharing the information with others. One other thing I want to share with you as far as our partners, Lauren Relaford, who was Sojourners, the political director, spoke earlier. They signed on to a voting rights guide, Faiths United to Save Democracy, have a digital, have a downloadable toolkit that is available for individuals that want to do more, take action in their communities. Also, it gives you rules and guidelines per state as far as voter registration dates and when you need to take action. Again, right now, it's important that we are all educated and informed about what we can do to move forward in our society and do our part as engaged citizens. So I'll drop that link into the chat. And the last thing I would say is thank you for being with us this evening. If you would like to learn more about the work that we're doing at the Center for Faith, Justice, and Reconciliation, I invite you to visit our website, faithandjusticerva.com, to see all the wonderful programs that we offer, but also other opportunities. And also we encourage you to support the center and our work. If you would like to give a donation, you can do so. But we're grateful for individuals like Ms. Andrea Miller and the Center for Common Ground that continue to partner with us. And again, for us to be able to offer this, we want to be able to, again, share the resources, share the information, and to keep you engaged in your communities. And so again, this video will be available. And if you missed our last training with Ms. Miller, you can find that on our website as well. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. Don't forget, like, we all have a responsibility to do something and take action to become effective advocates in our community. So with that, have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Good night.